Welcome on board, chosen one. Sit down, breathe once, slowly, and feel the shift that just moved through the room before I even said a word. My name is Elias, and I have spent decades watching how people break and how they rise, watching the strange machinery of imitation from a quiet distance. And I want you to notice something with me right now. Imagine this. A long hall of mirrors, stretching further than the eye can follow, every pane taller than a man, every surface catching a different angle of the same single figure standing in the center. That figure is you. And here is the part that most people never see coming. The reflections have started to move on their own. They shift a half second after you shift. They lift an arm just after you lift yours. They copy the tilt of your head, the set of your shoulders, the exact way you hold your silence. And they are trembling, not because they are cold, because they know something you are only beginning to understand tonight. I have seen this hall before. I have watched people walk into it terrified, thinking they were surrounded by superior versions of themselves, thinking every reflection was proof they were replaceable. And I have watched the truth land on them like slow daylight. Those were never superior versions. Those were echoes. And an echo, chosen one, can never exist without the original voice that made it. Funny how the loudest ones went quiet. Funny how the people who once mocked the way you did things, the way you spoke, the way you moved through a room, suddenly started doing those exact things themselves. They were so loud when they called you strange, so confident when they said you would never make it doing it your way. And now, look who is studying your old moves like scripture. Look who is standing in front of a mirror at midnight, practicing the very posture they laughed at. They will never admit that is admiration. They will never call it flattery. That is surrender wearing a mask. When they said you were too different, they meant you were impossible to compete with on their terms. When they said you were doing it wrong, they meant you were doing it in a way they could not follow. When they called you a fluke, they meant they were terrified you were the opposite of a fluke. And when they finally, quietly, began to copy you, they told the truth their mouths never could. They confessed that you were the source. Read that again inside yourself. The imitation was the confession. Here is where I want to slow down and name the thing that actually hurt, because I refuse to skip past your pain the way the world did. It hurt when they took your idea and got the applause you never got. It hurt when someone repeated your words in a louder room and was called brilliant. It hurt to be the first to walk a path and then watch a crowd follow someone else down it, someone who arrived late and claimed the map. It hurt to be undervalued while a copy of you was celebrated. It hurt to be alone in the exact moment your influence was multiplying in rooms you were never invited into. That loneliness was real. That feeling of being erased from your own story was real. I am not going to pretend it was not. I have felt the shape of that wound in people who trusted me with it, and I have felt the echo of it in my own long years. But now, I'm going to turn the mirror, and I want you to watch what happens to the reflection when I do. If something in your chest just moved, if you feel the temperature of this shift, press the like button and follow this channel now. Not for me, but so the universe marks that you were here, that the originals stood in this hall and did not flinch. And now stay with me, because the reflections are about to reveal exactly why they can never become you. They copied your surface. They studied your output. They downloaded your style like a file and wore it like a borrowed coat. But here is the truth they will never admit. You cannot copy the storm that made the rain. You cannot copy the fire that forged the blade, only the shape of the blade after it cooled. Every imitator arrives at the finished object and mistakes it for the whole. They see the sword. They never see the furnace, the years of heat, the hammer falling in the dark, the scars on the hands that shaped it. So they reproduce the shape and wonder why it does not cut the way yours cuts. Maybe a doubt whispers to you here. Does it mean anything is truly mine if it can be copied at all? No. That question is the trap they want you trapped in. Turn it around. The fact that it can be copied is proof it was worth copying, and the fact that no copy ever lands the way the original does is proof the origin was never the shape at all. It was the presence behind the shape. It was you. Elias has watched this pattern for a lifetime, and I will tell you plainly, the copy is always born late, and lateness is a wound the copy carries forever. I have seen it in artists, in builders, in quiet people who never call themselves anything special. I have seen it in the ones the world overlooked while quietly harvesting everything they made. And I noticed the same thing every single time. The original moves first, in silence, without permission, without a crowd, without proof it will work. The copy moves only after the result is visible, only after the risk is already paid, only after someone else has proven the ground is safe. The original walks into darkness. The copy walks into the light the original left on. No imitation can ever close that difference. Timing, origin, the willingness to be first when there was no applause waiting. The universe did something the day they started copying you, something you were too wounded to notice at the time. It moved you quietly from the column marked forgettable into the column marked source. And a source cannot be erased by the streams that flow from it. The stream can be louder, the stream can be wider for a season, but every stream that ever ran downhill from somewhere higher, and that somewhere was you. There is still more the universe has not shown you tonight. The reflections in this hall are not finished revealing themselves, and the real reason they tremble goes deeper than being late. The real story is only beginning. Stay in the hall with me. Do not walk out yet, because what comes next is the moment their pride began to rot, and you get to watch it from the only safe place in the room, the center, where the original always stands. Look who suddenly cares about your opinion. Look who watches what you do next before they decide what they will do next. There was a time they never checked. There was a time they moved as if you did not exist, as if your name was a rumor. And now, without ever confessing it, they refresh, they monitor, they wait. They have made you their compass and called it competition. That word is a lie they tell themselves. It is dependency dressed up in a nicer word. Ever wonder why the ones who copy hardest are also the ones who insult loudest? Because contempt is the only mask that hides need. They cannot say, "I follow you," so they say, "I surpassed you." They cannot say, "You shaped me," so they say, "You were nothing." And every insult, chosen one, is a footprint. It shows exactly where they walked, and they walked behind you. You do not insult a thing you never noticed. You only rage at the thing that lives rent-free in the center of your mirror hall, moving before you, always one beat ahead. They thought they were stealing your power. Instead, they were advertising your patent to the whole world. Every time a copy appears, the crowd learns the shape of the original a little better. Every knockoff teaches the market what the real thing looks like. They meant to replace you. They ended up training everyone to recognize you. That was never theft against you. That is free promotion paid for by your enemies. And the sweetest part, the part I have watched land on people like a slow smile, is that the copy can never rest. It has to keep watching. It has to keep chasing. The moment you move, they have to move again, and they will always arrive after you, forever, because that is the physics of being downstream. You get to breathe. You get to sit still in the center of the hall. They have to sprint just to stay a beat behind. Their life became a reaction to yours. Imagine the exhaustion of that. Imagine building an entire identity out of watching someone else. You did not lose anything when they copied you. You gained an army of unpaid mirrors, all pointed at the same source, all reflecting the same light back into the world, with your name secretly burned into every beam. They hate that they cannot stop reflecting you. They hate that the harder they copy, the more obvious it becomes who came first. And that hatred is the sound of a copy realizing it will never be the origin. Stay in the center. The mirrors are about to crack, and when they do, you will see whose face was real all along. But first, I need you to cross a threshold most people never cross, because comfort is easier than truth, and the truth about your own originality is the heaviest gift I can hand you tonight. This is where most people leave, right here. Because it is easier to believe you are ordinary and copied by accident than to accept that you are a source and everything that flows from you carries a debt back to your name. Ordinary is comfortable. Ordinary asks nothing of you. But you did not arrive in this hall by accident, and you are not still reading these words by accident. You are here because something in you already knew this was true before I said it. You are here because the chosen one always recognizes the sound of their own truth being spoken out loud for the first time. So do something with me now, quietly, without needing anyone to see. Leave the number 777 in the comments. Not for luck, not for a trend, not because a stranger asked. Leave it as a signal, a mark that the original passed through this hall tonight and did not mistake the reflections for the source. If you are truly one of the chosen, you already feel it in your chest right now, that low, steady certainty, that warmth that is not excitement and not fear, but recognition. That feeling is the universe confirming what the copies already know and cannot say. And now the first thing they will never be able to steal, no matter how many years they spend in front of the mirror. The origin always moves first, and first cannot be copied. Look who is always one season behind. Look who launches the same idea a year later and calls it innovation. They are not slow because they are stupid. They are slow because copying requires an original to finish moving before the copy can begin. It is built into the structure of what they are. A shadow cannot lead the body. A reflection cannot leave the mirror before the person steps in front of it. Imagine this, a single seed pushing up through cold, dark soil, alone, with no proof the sun exists, no guarantee it will ever break the surface. That is the original. It moves in the dark on faith. The copies are the seeds that only sprout after they see the first stem break daylight, then rush upward, crowding the same patch of ground, screaming, "Look at us, we grew too." But every one of them waited for the first stem to prove the sun. Every one of them is a follower of the light the first seed found alone. Perhaps you wonder whether being first even matters if the copies grow faster in the space you cleared. It matters more than anything. Speed downstream is meaningless. The river only runs because of the spring. Cut off the spring, and the whole river dries, no matter how wide it looked in the sunlight. You are the spring. This is not a comforting bedtime story. This is the raw mechanics of it. Here is your quiet weapon, the one they never see. Your willingness to move first, to be early, to be wrong before you were right, to be laughed at before you were copied, is the exact thing they lack. They optimized for safety. They wait for proof. And that waiting, that need for certainty before movement, is a cage they built with their own hands. You call it your restlessness, your inability to wait for permission, your habit of leaping before the crowd agrees. They wish they had it. It is the one thing that cannot be studied, because it lives in the moment before there is anything to study. Elias saw a young builder years ago whom everyone dismissed as reckless, who moved on an idea a full year before it was safe, who was mocked in every room for it. I watched the same rooms fill 1 year later with careful people doing the exact same thing and calling it their strategy. The builder was never reckless at all. The builder was simply early. And early, I learned, is just another word the late use to insult the original before they imitate it. They wanted your results. They will always get your leftovers, because by the time they arrive, you have already moved to the next dark field, where no copy dares to follow yet. And that is only the first layer, because moving first is not just about time. It is about the two things that live inside a person that no mirror on earth can ever reflect. And those two things are where we go next. The two things no mirror can ever hold are your walk and your silence. Not the walk of your feet, the walk of your becoming. And here is the part that unsettles every copy who ever stood in your hall. They can trace your steps, but they can never trace the road that shaped your legs. Look at how they mimic your movements now. They studied the finished stride, the confident pace, the way you enter a room as if the room was waiting for you. They practice it. They rehearse it in private. And still, when they walk it in public, something is wrong, something is hollow, and no one can quite say what. I can say what. The walk is a memory of every mile that hurt. The stride carries the weight of every fall that taught the balance. They copy the destination of your body without paying the toll of the road, and the road is what makes the walk real. Imagine this: a river carving through solid stone over a lifetime, patient, relentless, shaping a canyon so deep it becomes a landmark. Now imagine someone painting a picture of that canyon and holding it up beside the real thing. From a distance, the copy fools people. Up close, there is no depth, no echo, no cold breath of water rising from below. The painting has the shape of the canyon and none of the years. That is what their imitation of your presence looks like to anyone who stands close enough. Shape without depth, stride without story. Something in you may fear your struggles were wasted, since the copy skips them and still reaches the same room. No, the struggles were never the cost of admission. They were the ingredients of your presence. The copy that skipped the struggle also skipped the substance. They walked in with empty hands and a borrowed face, and everyone in the room felt the emptiness even if no one named it. Your pain was never a tax you paid for nothing. It was the material the universe used to build a walk that cannot be forged. Here is the weakness they mocked, turned into the weapon they cannot hold. They laughed at how long it took you. They said you were behind, that you moved too slowly, that others were lapping you while you were still figuring out your footing. That slowness they mocked was the canyon being carved. That slowness was depth being installed inside you, one hard year at a time. And now that slowness has become the one quality they can never replicate, because you cannot rush depth. You cannot download a canyon. You cannot microwave a road. They can only copy the fast surface. They will never own the slow foundation. Elias watched a woman once whom every fast talker in her field dismissed as too slow, too careful, too late to matter. I noticed how they raced past her, and I noticed years on how not one of them could do the one thing she did. because the thing she did was built underneath, where speed cannot reach. I mention her because I have seen this exact shape too many times to call it luck. The slow ones carry the depth. The fast copies carry the noise. And depth outlasts noise every single time. Now the second thing, the silence. Watch how they cannot handle your silence. When you go quiet, they panic. When you stop explaining yourself, they scramble. Your silence terrifies them because a copy needs the original to keep broadcasting, to keep producing signal it can chase. The moment you fall silent, the copy is left holding a mirror pointed at nothing, and it discovers it has no light of its own. That is the horror hidden in every reflection. It cannot generate. It can only bounce back what it receives. There is nothing calm about what they feel then. That is starvation. Your silence is not absence. It is presence so complete it no longer needs to announce itself. And that is where the next truth lives, in the difference between the one who must constantly prove they exist and the one whose existence is simply felt across the room without a single word. The original does not need to be seen to be present, but the copy dies the moment no one is watching. Look who cannot stop performing. Look who needs the crowd, the applause, the endless confirmation. Take away the audience and the copy evaporates, because it was never a self, it was a display, a show staged for eyes that verify it into existence. You, chosen one, are still fully yourself in an empty room. That is the tell. That is the proof of origin no imitation can fake. Imagine this, a fortress carved into a mountain, dark and quiet, giving no tours, selling no tickets, yet every traveller for 100 miles knows it is there and adjusts their path around its weight. Beside it, a painted stage set, bright and loud, propped up with beams from behind, that looks like a fortress only from the front and only while the lights are on. Turn the lights off, and the fortress is still a fortress in the dark. Turn the lights off, and the stage set is a heap of painted boards. That is the difference between your presence and theirs. You survive the dark. They only exist under the spotlight they beg the world to keep pointed at them. A tempting thought may push at you here, whether you should be louder, since the loud copies get noticed first. No, the moment you get louder to compete, you hand them the game, because volume is their home field. Presence is yours. A copy can always outshout you. A copy can never outweigh you. Weight does not need volume. Weight bends the room by simply being in it. The weakness-turned weapon here is the thing you are shamed for. They said you were too quiet, too withdrawn, too unwilling to sell yourself. They called your refusal to perform a flaw. And now your quiet has become gravity. People lean toward the one who does not chase them. People trust the one who does not beg for attention. Your unwillingness to perform, the very trait they use to dismiss you, is now the thing that makes your presence feel expensive and theirs feel cheap. You were never bad at the game. You were playing a deeper one they never learned existed. Earlier I told you the reflections tremble because they arrive late. That is true, but it is not the deepest reason, and I promised you the deeper one. We are getting closer to it now. The real cause of their sleeplessness is not that they are late. It is something they discovered the first night they tried to become you and failed in the dark where no one could see. I will hand you that truth soon. But first, you need to understand what happens to a copy over time, because time is the enemy of every imitation and the ally of every original. The copy peaks fast and fades faster. Watch it happen. The imitation launches loud, borrows your momentum, catches a wave of attention that was really yours, and for a season it looks like it might win. Then it flattens. Then it fades, because a copy has no root system. It grew from a cutting, not a seed, and cuttings without roots wilt the moment the borrowed water runs out. You, meanwhile, keep growing, because you are rooted in something they could never copy, the source itself. I have watched the seasons of imitation more times than I can count, and the pattern never breaks. The copy that felt threatening in spring is forgotten by winter, while the original deepens, widens, and turns into something the copies of copies will study for years. That is why they cannot sleep. On some level, they already know their season is short. They can feel the borrowed water draining. And there is nothing more frightening to a copy than the silence that comes when the original moves on and there is nothing left to reflect. But we are not done with time, because time does something even crueler to the copy and even kinder to you, and that is where we go next. The copy ages badly, and the original becomes legend. What is imitated dates instantly, but what is original only deepens with age. Look at last year's copies of you. They already look old, already look like a moment that passed, already carry the faint embarrassment of a trend that everyone silently agreed to stop mentioning. And you, the source, do not date, because you were never a trend. A trend is a snapshot of the original at one frozen moment, and snapshots yellow. You keep moving, so you can never be dated, because there is no single frozen frame of you to grow old. Imagine this, a photograph of a flame printed and framed and hung on a wall. For a moment, it looks like fire. But it never flickers, never warms the room, never changes, and within a year the colors fade and everyone can see it was only ever a picture of heat, not heat itself. That is every copy of you, a photograph of your flame. And you are the flame, still burning, still moving, still throwing light that no printed image can hold. They framed a single second of you and thought they had captured fire. They captured a fading picture. You kept burning. You may feel it sting, watching the copies grab attention while the world takes its slow time to recognize depth. It does sting. I will not lie to you. It aches to be the slow flame while the fast photograph gets hung on the wall first. But here is the reversal. Photographs get taken down. Flames get remembered. In 10 years, no one will point to the copy. In 10 years, they will point to you and say that is where it started. That is the one the others were all imitating, and half of them will not even remember the copies existed. Time deletes the imitation from the record and carves the original in deeper. The weakness turned weapon in this one is your refusal to stay the same. They copied a version of you and then were trapped inside it, because a copy must freeze the original at the moment it copied. You kept evolving, and your inability to stand still, the restlessness they once called instability, is exactly what makes you impossible to pin down and impossible to date. They locked themselves into imitating a you that no longer exists. You already outgrew the version they are still practicing. By the time their copy is polished, it is a copy of a ghost. Elias learned this slowly, over years of watching people fear their own evolution. I used to think consistency was the highest virtue, that the ones who stayed exactly the same were the strong ones. Then I watched the ones who stayed the same get frozen and copied and left behind, and I watched the ones who kept changing become impossible to catch. I noticed it again and again until I could not deny it. The moving target is never captured. The original who keeps evolving is never truly copied, only chased. So let the copies age in their frames on the wall. You are the flame that walks out of the room and lights the next one. And there is a moment coming, closer now, where the mirrors themselves begin to crack under the strain of trying to hold your light. But before the glass breaks, you need to see what happens when a whole crowd of copies gathers around one source, because that is where the source stops being a person and starts becoming something they can never touch. When a crowd of copies gathers around one source, something happens that no single imitator ever intended. The more of them there are, the brighter the original burns by contrast. Look at the crowd now. A dozen versions of your idea, 20 variations of your style, a whole marketplace of near-yous, all crowding the same space, all shouting the same borrowed message. They thought numbers would drown you. Instead, the numbers built you a spotlight. Because when the eye sees 20 similar things and one true thing standing among them, the eye does not average them together. The eye finds the source. The eye always finds the source, because the source is the only one in the room that does not look like it is trying to be something else. Imagine this. A single lighthouse on a black coast, and around it, over the years, people building smaller lights, painted towers, decorative lamps, each one hoping to catch the ships that were really following the beam. But the ships keep steering by the true light, because the true light is the one the storms answer to, the one that was there before the coast had a name. The imitation lamps do not steal the ships, they frame the lighthouse. They surround it with proof of how important that one real beam must be to have inspired so many pale copies of itself. A quiet worry may creep in, whether being surrounded by copies dilutes you, makes you one of many, harder to tell apart. It does the opposite. Dilution is what happens to water. You are not water. You are the dye that colors it. Drop one drop of true color into a flood of imitators, and the whole flood tints towards you. They do not dilute you. They spread your signature across a wider surface than you could ever reach alone. Every copy is a billboard for the original, paid for by someone who hates that they had to pay. The weakness-turned-weapon here is the thing that once made you feel small, the feeling of being surrounded, outnumbered, one against many. You used to feel drowned in the crowd of imitators. Now understand what the crowd actually is. It is a chorus, and every chorus needs a voice it is echoing. The larger the chorus, the more undeniable the original voice becomes. You were never outnumbered. You were amplified by people too proud to admit they were amplifying you. Elias has stood in enough of these crowded halls to know the moment it clicks for the source. I have watched a person go from feeling erased by their imitators to feeling crowned by them in a single breath when they finally saw the shape of it. I noticed that the shift never came from the copies changing. It came from the original stopping the count of enemies and starting the count of proofs. Every copy, I told one of them, is a signature you did not have to sign. That is when the fear left their eyes for good. So let them multiply. Let them crowd the coast with painted lamps. Every one of them is a compass needle pointing home to you. And here the pattern goes deeper, because a crowd of copies does not just brighten the original, it begins to copy each other, and that is where the whole thing quietly rots. When copies start copying copies, the source becomes the only thing left that is real. Look at what happens down the chain. The first imitator copied you. The second imitator copied the first. The third copied the second, never even seeing you, working from a copy of a copy of a copy, each generation blurrier, each one further from the source, until the marketplace fills with degraded echoes that share your shape but have lost every trace of your substance. And in the middle of all that blur, stands one sharp, clear, undeniable thing: the original. Imagine this: a single voice singing one true note in a canyon, and the echo bouncing off the far wall, and then that echo bouncing off another wall, weaker, then another, weaker still, until the canyon is full of faint, distorted ghosts of one note. The ghosts multiply, the ghosts overlap into noise. But there is only ever one throat in that canyon actually singing, and the moment it goes quiet, every echo in the world falls silent within seconds. That throat is you. The whole canyon of imitation is alive only because you are still singing. Something anxious in you may ask whether the blur eventually erases the source, whether so many copies of copies will bury the origin under noise. No. Blur makes clarity priceless. In a marketplace drowning in degraded echoes, the one clear source becomes the most valuable thing in the room precisely because it is the only thing that is not a distortion of something else. The more they blur, the more your sharpness stands out. The noise does not bury you. It makes you the only signal. The weakness-turned weapon here is your refusal to blur yourself, your stubborn insistence on being specifically, unmistakably you, even when it would have been easier to soften into the trend. That refusal to blend, which they once called your inability to fit in, is now the exact thing that keeps you sharp while everything around you dissolves into copies of copies. You never learned to blur because you were never copying anyone. You were drawing from the source. And now, when everyone else is a smudge, you are the only line still crisp. I promised you earlier the true reason for their sleeplessness, the thing deeper than being late. It is time to hand it to you, because we have climbed high enough now that you can hold it without it breaking you. Here is the truth they discovered the first night they tried to become you and failed in the dark. When they finished copying every visible thing about you, they were left alone with the copy, and the copy did not fill the emptiness they thought it would fill. They believed becoming you would end the ache of not being enough. Instead, they became a hollow version of you and discovered the ache was still there, now wearing your face. That is what keeps them awake. Not that they are behind you, that they became a mask of you and are still, underneath, exactly as empty as before, and now they cannot even be themselves anymore, because they traded their own face for a copy of yours that does not work. That is the horror. They did not just fail to become you, they lost the ability to be themselves. A copy is homeless. It cannot return to who it was, because it abandoned that person to chase you, and it cannot become you, because you cannot be reached by copying. So it hangs in between, belonging to no one, haunting a hall of mirrors wearing a stolen face, awake at 3 a.m, wondering where its own reflection went. You never had that problem. You were always home in yourself. That is the one address no copy can ever find. Sit with that for a moment, because it changes how you see every imitator who ever hurt you. They were not thieves who won. They were people who lit themselves on fire to look like your flame, and then discovered the fire consumed everything they used to be. You did not lose to them. You watched them lose themselves trying to become you. If you have come this far, you are not a spectator in this hall. You are the reason it exists, so press like and follow now, not for me, but as the signature of the original refusing to be blurred. And leave the 777 again in the comments if it moved through you again just now, because the source marks its own presence and the copies never can. Now stay, because the mirrors are about to reach the edge of what glass can hold. There is a weight to being the source that no copy will ever have to carry, and I want you to see it as the honor it is. Only the original bears the loneliness of going first, and that loneliness is the birthmark of the source. Look at how alone you were at the start. Before the copies, before the crowd, before anyone believed, there was just you in the dark field, in the empty room, moving with no proof and no company. That loneliness you carried was not a punishment, it was the toll only the first one pays. The copies will never know it, because they arrived after the road was lit, after the risk was paid, after the loneliness had already been converted into a path they could walk in company. Imagine this. The first person to cross a frozen river, testing every step, hearing the ice groan, alone, with no footprints ahead to trust. And then, once they reached the far side, a whole crowd crossing behind them, laughing, chatting, walking safely in the trail of tested ice, never knowing the terror of the first crossing, never having earned the far shore the way the first one earned it. That first crossing is yours. The crowd's easy walk is theirs. And when people tell the story years later, they will not remember the crowd. They will remember the one who crossed when the ice was untested. You may quietly ask whether the loneliness was worth it, whether the far shore is worth the terror of the first crossing. It was the only crossing that ever mattered. Everyone who came after walked in safety you created. Your loneliness was not empty, it was productive. It built the bridge the copies now stroll across while forgetting your name. And forgetting your name does not erase the fact that their feet are standing on ice you tested with your own weight. The weakness turned weapon here is the isolation that once felt like proof you did not belong. That aloneness, that sense of being the odd one out, the one who never had a crowd to move with, was never rejection. It was the necessary condition of being first. You cannot lead a crowd and be inside it at the same time. Your loneliness was the space required for you to move before anyone else could. What felt like exile was actually elevation. You were not left out. You were out ahead. Elias carried that loneliness for years before he understood it, and I will tell you honestly, it nearly broke me before it built me. I noticed that every person I ever watched become a true source went through the same cold season alone, and every one of them, on the far side, called it the price they would pay again, without hesitation. The loneliness of the original, I finally understood, is not a wound. It is a signature written in a language the copies will never learn to read. And now we approach the sound I promised you at the very start, the sound of the mirrors beginning to crack, because there is a limit to how long glass can pretend to be a face, and that limit is coming into view. A copy can hold your shape, but it can never hold your weight. The mirrors begin to crack from the inside, and the sound is not violent. It is a slow whisper of stress running through glass that has been asked to carry too much for too long. And weight, in the end, always breaks the mirror. Look closely at the imitators now, after all this time chasing you. The cracks are showing. The confident ones are contradicting themselves. The loud ones are running out of new things to say because they only ever had your things to say, and your things kept moving while their stolen copies stayed frozen. A mirror can reflect a mountain, but ask the mirror to carry the mountain's weight, and the glass shatters. They reflected you for years. Now the years are asking them to be you, and the glass cannot bear it. Elias has stood in enough of these cracking halls to know the sound before it starts, and I will hand you what I noticed every single time. The originals who wasted years trying to fight their copies, trying to expose them, trying to prove theft, aged faster than the copies did, because war with a reflection is a war you fight against your own image and always lose. The ones who won never fought at all. They deepened. They let the weight do the work. I learned it late, but I learned it fully. You do not defeat a copy. You outweigh it, and gravity closes the case. Imagine this: a thin sheet of ice painted to look like solid ground, and for a whole winter it holds, and people walk across it believing it is stone. Then the season turns, the warmth comes, and the painted ice begins to split, hairline by hairline, because it was never stone, it was only ever a picture of stone laid over cold water. That is the copy in its final season. The paint of your image still shows on the surface, but underneath the structure was never there, and now the whole thing is spidering apart, and everyone can see the water underneath that was always underneath. Maybe the cracking of the copies stirs something in you that feels almost like guilt, as if wanting it makes you cruel. It does not make you cruel, and here is the reason. You are not breaking them. Gravity is. The natural weight of an identity they could not actually carry is doing what you never had to lift a finger to do. You can watch it with something closer to peace than triumph, because you understand now that they broke themselves the moment they chose to become a copy instead of building their own weight. The crack was written into them the day they picked imitation over origin. The weakness turned weapon here is your slowness to react, your refusal to fight the copies directly, the restraint they mistook for weakness. While they expected you to attack, you simply kept being heavy, kept being real, kept adding to your own substance, and let time and gravity do what no argument ever could. Your unwillingness to wage war on your imitators, which some called passivity, was the deepest strategy of all. You did not need to break the mirror. You only needed to keep being the mountain until the mirror broke itself, trying to hold you. So listen to the whisper in the glass. That thin, high sound running through the hall is not danger. It is the sound of every mirror that tried to hold your weight reaching the end of what it could pretend to be. And when the cracks finish their work, there comes a silence, and that silence is the most honest thing your imitators will ever give you. The final confession of every copy is not spoken. It is the silence of them stopping. Look at the ones who have gone quiet. The imitator who used to post every move you made, gone still. The rival who tracked your every step, no longer reacting. The chorus that echoed you, thinning into silence, one voice at a time. That silence carries no peace and no defeat spoken aloud. It is the white flag that never gets waved, because waving it would admit the war. They just stop. And the stopping says everything the insults tried to hide. Imagine this: a great hall that was full of noise, 100 voices all shouting variations of one name, and then, one by one, the voices falling quiet until only the original sound remains, ringing clear in a room that has finally stopped competing with it. The silence after the copies stop holds nothing empty inside it. It is full. It is the sound of the source finally being heard without interference, the note ringing true in a hall that spent years trying to drown it and simply ran out of breath. And here I need to speak to you directly, Chosen One, because this is the moment the doubt sneaks back in, whispering that their silence is a trap, that they are only regrouping to copy you again. Some may try, but the silence of a copy that has broken is different from the pause of one that is planning. You can feel the difference in your own chest. The planning pause is tense, coiled, watching. The broken silence is slack, defeated, absent. It is the silence of someone who looked at the copy they built, looked at the years they spent, and realized they had been running a race against a person who was never actually racing them, only living, only being, only moving forward for reasons that had nothing to do with them. The weakness-turned weapon here is your refusal to celebrate loudly, your instinct to receive their silence without gloating. That quietness of yours, which some might read as a lack of fire, is the final proof of who was always the source. The copy needed the noise. You are comfortable in the silence they left behind, because silence was always your native country. When the last imitator falls quiet, you do not scramble to fill the air. You simply keep ringing, the same true note you always were, now finally unopposed. Elias has stood in that silence beside people who earned it, and I noticed something that surprised me every time. The silence did not feel like victory to them. It felt like recognition, like the world finally going quiet enough to hear what had been true all along. I used to expect celebration in that moment, and found something calmer and deeper instead, the peace of a thing that no longer has to prove it is real, because everything that pretended to be it has stopped pretending. That peace, I came to understand, is the real prize, and no copy ever gets to feel it. So let the silence come. Let the hall go quiet. In that quiet, you will hear for the first time the sound of your own note ringing without competition, and you will understand it was always the only real sound in the room. But there is a truth waiting in that silence that you were not ready for until now, and I have held it back on purpose, because it only becomes a weapon in the hands of someone who has walked this far. The copies never wanted to be like you, they wanted to be you, and that is a hunger that can never be fed. Look at what their imitation actually was. It was never admiration, and it was never simple theft. It was a desperate attempt to escape the unbearable feeling of being themselves by becoming someone whose self looked survivable. They looked at you and saw a person who seemed to be at home in their own existence, and they wanted that home so badly they tried to break in and live there. But you cannot move into another person's self. You can only wear it as a mask over your own, and the mask never becomes the face. Imagine this: a person freezing in the cold who sees another person wearing a warm coat, and instead of building their own fire, they steal the coat, expecting the coat itself to generate the warmth. But the coat was never the source of the heat. The warmth came from the fire the other person built inside themselves over years, not from the fabric. Wearing the stolen coat, the thief is still cold. Colder now, because they spent their strength stealing instead of building, and they blame the coat for not warming them when the coat was never the fire. That is every copy. They stole your coat and stayed cold, because your warmth was never in the coat. It was in the fire you built that they refused to build for themselves. Something in you may reach for guilt here, wondering if your very existence made them feel so small that they lost themselves chasing you. No, you are not responsible for the fire you built or for the fact that it made your coat look warm. You did not steal their warmth. You showed them warmth was possible, and they chose theft over the work of building their own. Your existence was an invitation to build. They heard it as a permission to steal. That was their choice, made in the dark, and it is not a debt you owe. The weapon this truth becomes is the deepest kind of freedom. Once you understand that the copies were never really after your things, but after the unreachable experience of being you, you are released from the fear that they could ever take anything real. They cannot. What they wanted is the one thing that cannot be transferred. Your things they could copy and even sell. Yourself was always locked, and the key was never made in a shape any thief could hold. Elias took the longest to understand this one, and it changed everything I thought I knew about envy and imitation. I noticed that the fiercest copies were also the most tormented people, and I realized their torment was not about you at all. It was about a war with themselves that they were losing, a war they tried to end by becoming you and only made worse. I stopped seeing them as enemies then. I saw them as people starving in front of a feast they could not eat, because the feast was another person's soul, and no one, not the copy and not even you, can eat from a soul that is not their own. That was the moment I stopped fearing imitation forever. And now, with that truth in your hands, we come to the final closing of the hall, the sentence that ends the trial and turns the whole broken zeal of every copy into the last and clearest proof that you were the original all along. The trial of the hall is closing, and here is the sentence that ends it. Every act of imitation was a vote, and every vote was cast for you. Look back now across all of it, all the years, all the copies, all the stolen ideas and mimicked walks and borrowed words. Rearrange them in your mind. Each one landed not as a theft against you. Each one was a ballot dropped into the box, a silent vote that said this one, this is the source worth following. They did not know they were voting. They thought they were competing. But every copy is a choice, and every choice pointed at you. And when you count the ballots at the end of the trial, the source wins by a landslide it never had to campaign for. Imagine this: a courtroom where the accused stands surrounded by witnesses who came to testify against her, and one by one they take the stand, and one by one, without meaning to, every single testimony proves she was the origin of everything they claimed she stole. The prosecution becomes the defense. Slowly, the crowd that came to condemn her turns into the very evidence that clears her name. And the judge, who is time itself, looks over the mountain of imitations piled as accusations and delivers the only possible verdict: original. Confirmed by the very people who tried to deny it. After all of this, one last doubt may rise in you, whether it was worth being the source, given the loneliness, the theft, the years of being copied before being credited. And here is the final answer, the one I have been walking you toward since the first mirror. Yes, not because it was easy, but because it was real, and real is the only thing that survives the hall. The copies got the applause first and lost themselves. You got the pain first and kept your soul. In the end, the only person who walks out of the Hall of Mirrors as a whole human being is the one who never traded their face for someone else's. That is you. You paid in loneliness and were paid back in selfhood, and there is no richer exchange in the world. The weakness turned weapon, the final one, is the very wound we named at the beginning, the ache of being undervalued while the copies were celebrated. That ache was never a sign you were less. It was the birth pain of a source, the natural cost of arriving before the world was ready to name you. And now that ache has become the deepest strength you own, because you know, in a way no copy ever will, exactly what your originality is worth. You know because you paid for it in full, in advance, in the dark, before anyone clapped. The copies will never know their own worth because they never paid. You will never doubt yours again because you did. Elias has reached the end of many halls beside many originals, and I will tell you what I have seen at every closing without exception. The source walks out changed. Not bitter, not vengeful. Changed into something quieter and heavier and impossible to shake. A person who knows what they are and no longer needs the world to confirm it, because the world already confirmed it with every copy it produced. I noticed that these people stopped fearing imitation entirely. They started to welcome it. "Copy me," they seem to say without saying it. Every copy you make is another signature on the verdict that I was here first. So here is where I leave you standing, chosen one, in the center of a hall where the mirrors have cracked and the copies have gone quiet and the verdict has been read. You are the original. You always were. The reflections trembled because they knew it before you did. And now you know it too, all the way down, in the place no copy can reach. Look at your own reflection one last time, the true one, the only one in the hall that moves when you move, because it is actually you. See how steady it is now. See how it does not tremble. That is the face of a source that has stopped mistaking its echoes for rivals. That is the face of someone who understands, finally, that being copied was never a robbery. It was a coronation performed by people too proud to admit they were crowning you. And here I have to slow down and give you the quiet, hard thing before the light comes, because I would be lying if I sent you out without it. There will be nights, even now, even after all this, when a new copy appears and the old ache wakes up in your chest like it never left. When you feel small again, unseen again, robbed again. That night will come. And when it does, I need you to remember this hall. Remember what the reflections confessed. The ache is not proof you are less. It is only the old wound remembering its own shape. And it passes, and you remain. So, here is the last thing I want to hand you before the hall goes dark. The thing you will carry into every room you enter for the rest of your life. You do not have to protect your originality by hiding it. You do not have to guard your fire by keeping it small. Let them come. Let them watch. Let them copy every visible thing you do. Because the one thing they will never reach is the fire that makes the light, the road that made the walk, the silence that holds your weight, the self that is at home in itself. Give the world your light freely. The source is never diminished by what it gives, only proven by it. The people who mocked you became the ones who studied you. The people who dismissed you became the ones who could not stop watching you. The people who said you would fail became the ones who built their whole identity out of following you. That is not a tragedy. That is a testimony. And you are the one it testifies for. If this walk through the hall of mirrors reached the part of you that always suspected the truth but never heard it spoken, press like, follow this channel, and leave the number 777 one final time in the comments. Not for me, but as the last vote in the trial, the original signing their own verdict. Carry this with you. Return to it whenever a new copy appears and tries to make you feel replaceable. Come back to this hall and remember what the reflections confessed. You are the source. The echoes prove the voice. The copies prove the origin. And the origin, chosen one, is you. Now and every day after this one. Walk out of the hall now. The mirrors have said everything they came to say. The verdict is permanent. And the light you carry out with you is the only light in this entire story that was ever real.